Hey there, Bernie Miklasz back with you. Decided to do a second video today because haven't talked enough about Mizzou basketball here on the Bernie Miklasz Show. And I did a St. Louis Blues video earlier in the day. If you Blues fans, any of you out there watching me or you're coming across this, take a look at that, please. Now we turn our attention to Mizzou. And I have been having a lot of fun, like most of you who are Mizzou fans, a lot of fun watching the Tigers play basketball this season. A year after losing all 19 games, played against SEC opponents that include one SEC tournament game, lost all 19 games. The Tigers are 10-7 in conference play, and they're 21-9 in overall. And some of the estimates I've seen, they're somewhere between right now. It's subject to change between a number 4 and a number 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. A projection, we'll see. Again, got some basketball still to be played. The SEC is a beast of a conference. We know this. The strongest and most ruthless in the land. And most of the 16 teams in this conference have gotten bounced around and knocked down a bit. Auburn might be one exception, but we're just talking about a conference where no one's going to get through it without some scratches, without some cuts, without some minor wounds, right? Or, and a lot of them will take on major wounds. And that's especially true on the road. Through Wednesday night's action, only 3 SEC teams had a winning record on the road this year. Auburn's 8-1, Alabama 8-2, and Florida at 6-3. There are 3 other teams that are 500 on the road, and then 10 SEC teams have losing records in SEC away games, including Tennessee, Kentucky, and Mizzou. All 3 are very fine teams. Pardon me. It's late. Been doing a lot of work today, so I got the marbles in here. I apologize. Thanks for bearing with me. So as much as I enjoy watching Mizzou play, it's been a little less satisfying lately. Mizzou has lost 3 of its last 4 overall, and that includes 3 straight road games. At Arkansas, loss. Vanderbilt, loss. Oklahoma last night, loss. And for all the Mizzou fans who were safely ensconced at home on Wednesday night, that 96-84 thumping by the Sooners was an unpleasant viewing experience. I hung in there, though. Mizzou's defense collapsed, and there's no other way to put it. There were other problems, of course. Tigers made 29% of their three-pointers. It was just one of those games. It was not a good night. But what bothered me about it is that the defensive weakness we saw last night was glaring, and I wouldn't really care about a bad night. I mean, everybody can have a bad night. The best teams have a bad night, and certainly throughout the course of a season, there are going to be times when your offense is bad in a game, your defense is bad in a game. Your 3-point shooting may be great, and then 3 days later it's awful. That's basketball. That's competition. But what has my alarm sounding, and it's not a shrill alarm, it's just an alarm that I hear after watching some of these Mizzou games as of late. We saw Oklahoma exploit a Mizzou vulnerability that's been all too common for a while now. And I'm not trying to make too big of a deal about this. I'm really not. But I don't want to lie. The Tigers' defensive downturn that we've watched is a concern. After playing Kentucky at home to close the regular season on Saturday, Mizzou's going to compete in the SEC tournament, and then the Tigers will go dancing in the NCAA tournament. March Madness, can't wait. Favorite time of the year. We have no idea, of course, who Mizzou's going to play. Estimates or projections, as I should say, have the Tigers somewhere between a 4 and a 5 seed, but that can change because there's more games to go, right? As a fan of the Mizzou Tigers, I'm hoping that whoever they face in the NCAA tournament, including the first opponent, I'm hoping none of these opponents, for as long as possible, if Mizzou lasts a while, right? I hope none of their opponents take the court with a rugged, physical, pound the ball inside offense. We're going to attack you. We're going to get to the rim. And Mizzou has really had a devil of a time against those kinds of teams in the SEC as of late, especially. They've really gotten flattened by teams that want to go invade the lane. And the damage isn't always in the paint. It's just inside the arc. I mean, basically the Tigers have been getting burned on 2-point shots. And again, I tip of the cap because we know that the competition is at a high level, and maybe they won't have to deal with competition is at such a high level, the quality of the opponent once they get into the NCAA tournament. So I am trying to keep all of this in perspective. But man, this continues to be something that to me, you're like, uh-oh, can they fix this? Is this something that's going to lead to an early demise in the NCAA tournament? I sure hope not, because I want to see Mizzou go on a run, man. It's been too long. Now, if we talk about the components of the game, the Tigers do fine in the shooting from deep matchup. 3 points, their 3-point shots against the other team's 3-point shooting. I just want to explain. I don't know why. But when opponents move inside the arc to take their shots, Mizzou's exposed. The recent trends are not good at all. So I want to share with you my look, doing some numbers today at Mizzou's last 5 games. 2 were home court victories over Alabama and South Carolina, and the other 3 were those road losses that I mentioned in Fayetteville, Nashville, and Norman. And even when winning at home, the defense wasn't exactly stellar. So let's start with an overview of these 5 games, all right? Over the last 5 games, Mizzou's defense has yielded an average of more than 90 points per game. It's about 92. South Carolina had 71 in that lost by the Gamecocks at Mizzou Arena. But the other 4 teams in this 5-game stretch averaged 90, basically about 99 points per game against the Tigers. And the overall field goal percentage by opponents, and this includes South Carolina in the last 5 games, 55%. Not good at all. So let's talk specifically about the 2-point shooting over the last 5 games. Opponents have hammered Mizzou for 129 made 2-point shots. That's an average of just under 26 twos made per game against the Mizzou defense. And the attack inside has been very efficient, with Mizzou opponents making about 65% of their 2-point shots over the last 5. That's bad. There's no other way to put it. That's really bad. If you look at it, is it like in terms of a territorial battle? Okay, well, who's owning the lane? Who's owning the area of the court inside the 3-point arc? Well, I got an answer for you. In the last 5 games, Mizzou has been outscored 258 to 200 in 2-point baskets. That means the 5 opponents outscored Mizzou on 2-point shots by an average of around 11.6 per game, 11.6 points per game, I should say. In other words, when we're measuring the teams in terms of the 2-point shooting, right? The other side, on average, is getting about 11.6 points per game more than Mizzou on those type of shots over the last 5 games. All right, let's talk about painting. In the last 5 games, Mizzou has been outscored 140 to 96 in the paint. In these last 5 games, Mizzou has also been outscored from the free throw line. Now, it's not by much. I think the 5 opponents, I think, have made like 104 free throws. Mizzou's made about 100. It's not by much, but that's really not the point. Because as you know, if you watch Mizzou, for a long time this season, the Tigers have used their physicality to get to the foul line with a lot greater frequency than their opponents, but that has not been happening as much over the last 5 games. So Mizzou, in effect, has lost an advantage that they've had for much of the season. Mizzou would come out, hit a lot of shots. That offense would be rolling. Mizzou, it wasn't true in Norman, but Mizzou has been such a great first-half team in SEC play. But the Tigers, so they get a lead, then they get to the foul line, and they're making free throws the best that they can. They're not great at shooting those free throws, but they had such an abundance of free throws that it was kind of their way of just putting teams away, right? So they've kind of lost that advantage, at least for these 5 games, where free throw shooting is about neutral in terms of how many free throws are scored in a game. Over the last 5, it's pretty much neutral, slight advantage to the opponents, who are certainly holding their own. And the other concern attached to the free throw shooting, in the last 5 games, opponents have made free throws at a rate that's 32% higher than Mizzou's free throw success rate. That's not good. You don't need me to tell you that. So here's the deal. With Mizzou's defense surrendering so many easy points overall, and especially inside, really puts a huge burden on Mizzou's offense. And that offense still makes it rain. Not always, of course, but Mizzou has scored a lot of points all season. There have been a few exceptions, but not many. So if we look at the last 5 games, the Mizzou Tigers have averaged 94.5 points per game. Now, the other 5 opponents, as I mentioned earlier, have averaged 91 per game. So Mizzou, on average, has outscored their opponents over the last 5. But that's a little misleading because of what I was explaining earlier. The fact that Mizzou, blew out South Carolina at home, but the other 4 teams that they've encountered during this time, the other 4 teams during this stretch, have averaged like just under 99 points per game. And so Mizzou scored 94. You're averaging 94 points per game over a 5-game stretch, and you've only won 2 of the 5. That's a little crazy, right? I mean, how many points do we expect, Grill and Bates and Mitchell and all the fellas to pile up? I mean, are they going to have to start averaging 100 per game? Look, there's going to be twists and turns, and I think the NCAA tournament will be different, and that's a good thing because SEC play is sort of taking its toll on the Tigers' defense late here in the going. All right, I want to share this too, just to put it in some kind of national perspective. If you think that I'm kind of making too much of a fuss over it, I'm really trying not to. It's only 5 games, so yeah, small sample size. But here's what I did. I went to barttorvik.com. And I fooled around with the search engine where you can put in dates and find out how teams do from a certain date to another certain date. So from February 19th through March 5th, which covers these 5 games, here is where the Mizzou Tigers rank among the 364 Division I teams nationally in the pertinent categories defensively. Warning, these numbers, my friends, are shocking. Missouri is number 241 among 364 teams in adjusted defensive efficiency over this stretch. Mizzou is number 326 among 364 teams in their opponent's effective field goal percentage, right? In other words, effective field goal percentage, Mizzou's getting shredded is what that comes down to. So they rank 326 among 364 in opponent effective field goal percentage. This is the worst one of all, and this is why I was determined to go look this stuff up, because I imagine it's been getting pretty bad. I mean, pretty bad. And I wanted to make sure it was, in fact, pretty bad. And I also wanted to give it some context. So in the last 5 games, Mizzou ranks number 362 out of 364 teams in 2-point defense. That's based on the other team's success rate, their field goal percentage, their made 2-point shots. How many percent you make? Well, I said that earlier in the video. Opponents have made like 65% of their twos. So over the last 5 games, that shooting percentage against Mizzou on twos is the second worst by a defense in the nation. I think that's bad. It doesn't mean it's going to stay that way, but let's own up to it. Let's square up to it. It's been bad. Now, listen, Mizzou has size. I like to watch Josh Gray play, but Mizzou does not have a shot blocking team at the rim, and that's another thing. For the season, the Tigers ranked 270th nationally in block shot percentage, and for the entire SEC schedule, conference games only, the Tigers are the worst shot blocking team in the SEC. And they've only blocked 4 shots total in their last 3 road losses. So that stat ties into what we're saying. No wonder teams are feasting on 2-point shots. No wonder teams are living in the paint and making it paint. And they're just, and it's black and blue bruises for the Mizzou Tigers. That's the colors, the paint they use. Anything that looks like a wound, that would be the paint that's the other team's using inside the lane there. So that explains why the 2-point percentage against Mizzou is really high. It's ridiculously high. It explains a lot, actually. So I'm not a coach. Yeah, I think you noticed, right? So I can't say what the solution is to all of these problems, but I can look at the metrics and I can tell you that 10 Mizzou players, the 10 that have played the most minutes in the 17 SEC games so far, the 10 guys who played the most minutes in SEC action, they all have a below average defensive rating according to the metrics at Sports Reference, which you can find as part of the Baseball Reference network, things like that. No one is better than 9% below average. No one is better than 9% below average. And the worst is about 17.5% below average. It's just not a solid unit defensively. And I know I've said this, and I'm going to say it again. The fact that you're going to go from the toughest, roughest conference in college basketball, when you get in the tournament, it might not be as tenacious and aggressive and nasty. Again, that's a theory. It's like a horse that's been running against faster horses and they go to another track and they can run a slower time and still win because the opponent's not as fast as the horses that they've been running against. Does that make sense? I think it does. So I wanted to give you an analogy. Coach Dennis Gates and his assistants are going to have to come up with something that can stop the bleeding defensively when opponents come at them inside, when they get inside the arc and they get into the paint and they get to the rim. There just hasn't been enough resistance defensively by your Mizzou Tigers. Look, we know the SEC, as I've said about 20 times in this video already, we know that as neighborhoods go, the SEC is the toughest neighborhood out there in college basketball. So perhaps, again, I'm going to say it again. I'm not losing my optimism. Perhaps the Tigers can go into the NCAA tournament and encounter opponents that are a lot more civil, a lot more polite, not as rude about going at the rim. Perhaps they can be a more gentlemanly game. I'm being facetious, of course. But I want to reiterate, I haven't lost any faith in Gates and the Mizzou program. It's an exciting time. It's been an exciting season. But admittedly, I'm losing some faith in the defense. So let me end this little video here with a plea, maybe even an urgent plea. Mo defense, Mizzou. Mo defense. See what I did there? What did I say? It's been a punchy day. It's 6:00 as I'm ending this video, but I enjoyed making it for you. I hope you get something out of those numbers. They not exactly the happiest, brightest numbers, but it kind of gets to the root of the problem. I'm sure many of you knew that already. I was just trying to explain to you just how bad it's been in the last 5 games. Hopefully this will improve, and hopefully I will say goodnight or goodbye. And whenever you watch this video, thank you for doing so. I'm Bernie Miklasz, and this is the Bernie Miklasz Show.